Here we are live. Jon Juene. It's Jon Juene, right? That's
Hey,
how we say it. I've only read your
yes,
name.
sir.
Welcome to the
Yeah, no,
podcast.
thank you, Sonny. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure, man.
My pleasure. Are you ready to talk some Dynasty or what?
Absolutely, brother. Let's do it.
So, wait, before we get into it, go ahead and tell my listeners a little bit about the your podcast, Fantasy Diagnostics. Tell me a little bit about what your background. I know your podcast is mostly DFS redraft, but I think because I know you, I know you're worthy of talking dynasties with me as well. So, but go ahead and introduce yourself. I'm terrible at intro, so introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, man. Jon Juene, Fantasy Football Diagnostics or FFDX. Greg Penniman and myself. Yeah, we cover redraft, DFS. We do cover Dynasty in the off season. I did that for the first time this off season. Usually ran a solo podcast, just covering some Dynasty stuff, but prospect rankings, things like that. But in terms of my background, I played high school, college ball up at Northeastern in Boston, Massachusetts, up until the discontinuation of that program. But it was a 1AA program. I wasn't a big time player or anything, primarily backup linebacker, special teams player. But had a background in there. Also did a little bit of coaching, but just like everybody else, man, I just love fantasy football. I just love the game of football. Couldn't stay away from it. Can't stay away from it. And so this was an avenue. This is another avenue for me to get into it. So at Dynasty Leagues, I don't know if you know it, but our Dynasty League was the first Dynasty League that I ever got in. So
That's 4 years ago. So I've known Jon for 4 years now. Long before he or I did a podcast, we were in a league together.
I
And I
think it
think
was longer than that.
that's 4 or 5. Yeah, it's been a long time. I actually honestly didn't go back and look, but I know it's
My
a long.
first draft pick was Jameis Winston.
That was your
So
first. It was a
he
rookie.
was
That
my
was in rookie
rook.
draft. Yeah, because we always
Yeah,
start with rookie drafts. Yeah, that's amazing.
yeah,
So yeah, that's kind of where for me, even though I know you're all redrafting DFS, I was like, I'm gonna have Jon on here because I know Jon knows his dynasty, and the reason I know Jon knows his dynasty is because I play in leagues with you, and so we have history. It's amazing because a lot of times with dynasty guys like you, we kind of think alike. We're very competitive. We oftentimes like compete for the same players. Oftentimes I don't interact with them a lot of times in the league. They become like rivals or enemies. But for some reason, you and I have always had this weird relationship where we kind of like convene in the off season during the draft. We're always talking prospects. We're always like making fun of other people's draft picks. I find it kind of funny that we have this relationship where we are definitely rivals, and I've always like had mad respect for you. And we always are like, I know we think
absolutely.
so different, like so exactly the same. We're always like the same players, and we're always fighting over the same players. And yet at the same time, we for some reason, I really cherish it because I feel like so many leagues I don't have that with my biggest rivals. The only fact I just don't. I want nothing to do with them. For some reason, I'm willing to share more with you. I feel like we're both more open. And the fact that this offseason, I never tell my listener, I never tell my co teammate, my league mates about the podcast. I've never mentioned it to anybody. I've never mentioned it to you, but you mentioned your podcast to me this offseason. And I thought, well, I got to tell Jon that I'm doing this. And it didn't feel that bad because honestly, you're probably one of the few people that I share so much with anyways. So I just want to say that to kind of lead in that we do have a history, Jon and I, and I know Jon's just his acumen. He's snaked me on many players. We've had so many back and forths, and I like your aggressive nature as well. Honestly, like in the off season, a lot of times you're kind of person that decides you want somebody and you just go after it, and sometimes it's a good and bad for you. But I like that. I had a podcast that was called the overpay, the art of the overpay. And it's sometimes you're kind of a category like that, but you do it well most of the time. And so, like there's so many things about your game that I respect. So it's cool. And I'm going to mention something else here in a minute, a little history. You actually have some history on this podcast as well. So
Oh yeah, man. I mean, look, like everything you said, absolutely true, man. Our relationship, the way that we bond over dynasty, over prospects, over the rookie draft, like that thing it's genuine, it's real. So I definitely to be here to discuss dynasty, have this invitation, I didn't even think about it.
yeah, what's amazing. This actually occurred to me today, and I went back and looked. Is 1 year ago today was my podcast that I sent over to you. I actually sent it to you when I
Hmm.
first told you that I do a podcast too. I had to reveal to you that I'd actually talked about you on one of my podcasts, not by name, but I talked about you. So a year ago, it was actually November 6th last year. It was going into
Wow.
week 10. We're now November 10th, I guess, whatever, going into week 10. And the podcast was called Don't Give Up. Don't Ever Give Up. It was an ode to Jim Valvano, don't give up, don't ever. And it was basically what I broke down was my league mate, and it was Jon. I was leading the league. I was in first place, and I was looking to acquire a running back or something. I was looking at the bottom teams, and I think your team was 3-7. That's how I remember. You were 3-7, and I went to Jon and I said, "Hey, trade me this running back." I can't remember exactly all the details, and he said, "No, actually, I'm looking to add pieces right now because I'm looking to make a run." And I was like, "Oh, okay, all right, cool." But 2 days later, sure enough, Jon made a trade for Aaron Jones. He gave away a first-round draft pick, not his own first-round draft pick, but a first-round draft pick. Made some moves. I thought it was hilarious, and I was just like, "Oh wow, he really is. He's going in on the season." And sure enough, he won 3 straight games to finish the season at 6-7. Who did he meet in the first round of the playoffs after winning? Actually, after winning in the first round, and then meets me, the team with the bye, the team that should be winning, right? And you know the rest of the story. He goes on to win the championship. It was a great story. I thought it was so cool, and I went ahead and talked about it on my podcast because it was actually it wasn't last year. It was actually the previous year that I was talking about.
Yeah.
But to me, it was such a good lesson in just not quitting. And so many people early in the season, in like 0-4, they're just like, "Oh, I'm done, I'm toast." And then it's like, you could be all the way into week 10. And if you look at your schedule, and I think I remember talking to you about it afterwards, because you were like, "Can you believe it? I beat you." And, it's like, I honestly was happy for you. As hard as it is to lose, you want to lose that way, because I can imagine being in your shoes and what a great victory that would be. Yeah. And I remember you saying something like, I looked at my schedule and it was just kind of like, I saw the pieces that it might work. And so I thought, well, I don't want to quit. And I just thought that was really admirable. In a way, kind of inspired me. And this year I had a few teams that started 0-4 or 1-5, whatever. And I fought back and I'm still in contention. And I just think it's a great lesson. So, maybe tell me about right now. How are you feeling about your Dynasty team? Do you have any of that going on where you're in the no quit mode?
Yeah, I mean, there's some where I'm in the no quit mode, but some of them, man, it's just so tough with all the injuries. You can't.
This year.
It's really bad.
Yeah.
Some of them, you just got it. It is what it is. But the other ones where I'm like on the border, it's like I have one team, right? I'll give you an example. It was started out 0-5,
Wow.
but it was a team I took over. It was a replacement draft, so we ended up drafting players, but Miles Sanders injured, Devontae Adams injured, Justin Herbert, I got him as my quarterback, so I just been riding him. But now I'm 4-5, and I'm in third place in the division. I play the division winner this week, so I'm in position to potentially take the division lead if some things break my way. So it's assessing the team, assessing the schedule. Back then, the one thing that you probably didn't know was the player that I traded with to get Aaron Jones from. It was a 1 and a 3. I knew I was playing him twice in those next few weeks.
Oh, it's so good.
So I said to myself, I can essentially weaken my opponent, who I'm gonna play twice in the next 5 weeks or so, and propel my team. And you're right, I hedged my bet. I didn't trade away my first round draft pick in the event that I did lose and did not make the playoffs. I did
notice that too. I said, "Oh, he's not that confident." But either way, it's just one of those funny things. I remember, hey, you're still trading away my first round pick and you're 3-7. So
yeah, but the thing is I had 2 first round picks, I had 2 third round picks, and so I had I see those as assets. I see them as flexibility, right? And I saw Aaron Jones as he was 25, I think, at the time, or 20 he was 20 something.
He's 25 now.
Yeah, he's probably 25 now, right?
2 years ago, at least, yeah, he's probably 24 at least.
The way I saw it was, I'm trading a third round pick to essentially trade up in the draft to get a first round caliber running back, because Aaron Jones at the time hadn't fully breaking out yet, right. But he was on the
breakout.
Yeah, he was on the way to the breakout. So that was the way I saw it. So you could still buy a young player, right? That next draft class, who did we get? Miles Sanders, David Montgomery. So not a great running back class. Yeah. So I essentially, drafted Aaron Jones with that next round pick. And, it really depends on the roster, the schedule, the standings. This year especially, everyone's bunched up. They're either, 5-4, 4-5, 3-6. Everybody's bunched up, and so whether you're in 8th place, 10th place, you can still make the playoffs. You can still get a jump. Now, the question is, how good is your team? Is your team one of those teams that's going to be a first and out in the playoffs? Because if that, you don't really want to, maybe that's not a situation where you want to keep fighting. You know, you just got to be smart, really.
I find the problem I have with our leagues is that we play in leagues where if you don't make it in the playoffs, then you actually go into a bracket where you play for the first overall pick. So I'm always, if I'm borderline making those playoffs, I don't want to give up that first round pick because I might just go win that number one pick. I did that in our league. In fact, I won somebody else, Saquon Barkley, and I've never let that go. I won somebody else, Saquon Barkley, trying to make a run. And I've had my one last year, so I have my good years and everything. But it's tough when you're trying to trade away first round picks and they could potentially turn out. So it's another thing. If there's like some leagues where people are tanking, or if you're going to be a middle of the road or late round pick, that's one thing. But if you're right now, that's that I feel like in these leagues I have to wait a little bit longer to make the call on trading my picks. Where in other leagues, if I know it's just based on your record or whatever, I'm much more willing. Because if I'm competitive, and it doesn't matter if it's 7 or 9 or 12. It's like one of those is not going to be the biggest difference maker. But you get up to those top 2 or 3, and it can really hurt to have given that away. But yeah, okay. So I was listening along those lines. You were talking about running backs and stuff. I was actually listening to, I think it was Ray G, some other different Debbie type talk, and they were talking kind of the consensus I've been hearing a little bit is that there's a disappointment coming in next year, that there's a couple good running backs, but not a lot of running backs. And the kind of message was trade for some running backs this year, some potentially good running backs who might, end up being, just as valuable to a team, or, become a free agent signing because of the depth. I just wonder with this year and the COVID and everything, how much really people, coaches and the college and everything, how much information we're really getting and accurate information to make those assessments. But I just thought it was interesting, and because I know you do some scouting and play some college football and stuff. What do you think? Are you seeing anything with these upcoming classes?
Yeah, I mean,
inspire, or are you ready to ditch some picks?
No, the early indication I got, all the early indication I got was this draft class was going to be pretty good, potentially better than what we just got. So that was a lot of the early indication I got.
You're talking about running backs, I take it?
Not running backs, but just the overall class as the running back.
I don't think you can do better than the wide receiver class.
You've got Jamar Chase. Obviously, he's going to be the top of the class. But you've got the kid from Purdue. And I'm not really into Devy. I do most of my scouting.
Yeah, there's some good receivers. I get you. There's like 20 deep. Like Chase Claypool is. There's a couple guys that are second rounders, and even my Gabriel Davis and stuff this year coming out. That it's like, wow, these guys are coming out and just. That's another point that I think it's interesting that it used to be maybe that the 25 to 30-year-old wide receivers was kind of the pinnacle. But it seems like it's shifting. You can be a lot earlier than that. It seems like 23 to 27, and we've got those, the outliers almost. And once you get to 30, it's very rare that any guys are, hanging with the young guys anymore who can run routes and are more explosive and maybe don't have to get paid as much early on either.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what to make of it, but I think it's not just a COVID season with the injuries, with the there's a lot to, I think, even if this was a normal season, I have this feeling like maybe I would just invest, that I would be more willing to trade and am more willing to trade my rookie picks away from next year, based on the fact that I just feel like this is such a strong, there's so many strong players right now, young players, they're getting into them like a T. Higgins or, just you name it. I just traded for Higgins. I just trading for guys that honestly, they were just second round draft picks, but now I see them next year as like, I don't want to take my chances with all the weird stuff going on with the COVID. I don't know. It's just, and that's why I know you, and I know we're always like in the off season. It's going to be really interesting next year when we actually have to draft together and knowing that we both do podcasts and everything. So this year it didn't happen. We didn't actually talk till after our draft. I think most parts.
Yeah.
But I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I think just with the receivers, if you look at these receivers that are coming out, they're more skilled. They're better route runners. College offenses, they're not running anymore. They're throwing. And these guys, they're getting with specialists. You got the footwork king. All these guys are getting in line to work with him. Like, look at the move Jerry Jeudy threw up the other day. He's a rookie in week 9 doing that. So these guys are coming out more skilled.
Nobody's seen before.
Right. So, I think that we'll potentially see more of this stuff coming out as these guys, come out into the league. But to your point, I think you're onto something. You could either buy up on these guys like a T. Higgins, maybe buy low on a guy like I'm still really, really high on. I know redraft he's been frustrating, but from a dynasty perspective, the outlook is very high. That's DJ Moore. I
Yeah.
think he's a really good buy low option right now. Um, but I think that's a great. If you don't think that you're going to be able to get a Najee Harris or Travis Etienne or a Chuba Hubbard or Jamar Chase, you don't think that you're going to be able to get one of those top guys, then yeah, maybe the move is to trade for a T. Higgins or an Antonio Gibson, pay up for one of these guys now relative to what their cost was. I got offered maybe I'm crazy. Tell me if I'm crazy or not. I got offered a third round pick the other day, or a first round pick the other day for Antonio Gibson, who I got in the second, and I turned it down. Mainly
Absolutely.
because
Yeah, because right now this is why I talk about those two guys being the top, and then what's left after that. I do feel like there's some questions, even if it's not true, even if we know that there'll probably people are merging. I have to wonder if we're going to have as much clarity that it might be better to own multiple third and fourth round picks, because teams aren't going to have clarity going into the draft. They're going to be wanting to just kind of like add players, and then somebody like a James Robinson, but maybe even more talented, or, it's hard to say that now. I'm pretty excited about James Robinson, to be honest with you. Here's a question. Yeah. James Robinson or Cam Akers?
Oh, man. James Robinson looks so good. I mean, I'm with you. He looks really good, but I still believe in Cam Akers. I still believe in the talent. The problem with him is, what do you do with Darrell Henderson? Because
he looks good too. Right.
He looks great. He's still going to be there for at least the next 2 years. So it could be a while before we see Cam Akers really get to that production, while James Robinson has the role right now. So yeah,
it's like career wise, I agree. Yeah, I'm going James Robinson. I feel like career wise, and it's always about the team. Obviously, if my team is in contention, I'm like James Robinson becomes so much more appealing. Where if I'm not in contention, or I feel like it's borderline, then I might consider. But it's hard. This is where I have always maybe missed opportunities to take advantage of the mindset of redraft players in Dynasty. And I feel like I forget sometimes that people, like you said, with DJ Moore, people will get frustrated with somebody and they will just move them for somebody else that can produce right now. And I feel like that is something that's just our listeners, you, myself, it's something that you can really take advantage of sometimes. It's just being willing to not get that production right now and let somebody else have him. But with the James Robinson, I'm not convinced that he's not going to be productive in the future either. Like, he looks legit. I really like it. It's the pass catching, I think, that's the most convincing to me, that he's so stable. He runs with such a solid base. He's never going to put off a lot of splash plays, but he catches the ball a lot, and he's consistent in that. And that in fantasy, that's what we're looking for, all the touches. So yeah, that's a really, it's a tough one. Okay, so we were just talking, this or that. How about Herbert or Burrow?
Oh man,
yeah. This is the question. Everybody's asking these questions. I've already kind of answered the question, but I'm definitely on the fence about it. It's still a tough call.
Yeah. Man, the thing with Burrow is, right, you're betting on intangibles with Burrow, right? Like, I mean, with Herbert, it's the physical stuff that you see. Right, Burrow wasn't the number one pick in the draft because he had the strongest arm, or he was the fastest, the biggest, the strongest. He was number one pick in the draft because he had poise. He was smart. He could read defenses. So you're betting on things that you can't see with Burrow. While it's hard to pass on Herbert while he's throwing the ball 60 yards down the field. Oh man, I think I'd have to go with Burrow though. Honestly, I mean, just looking at you look at the offense, you look at Zach Taylor, you look at what he wants to do, you look at the weapons that are around him, and in a guy like T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, they're going to consistently be running 3-4 wide receiver sets. He's dropping back, 40 times a game as a rookie. So this offense is going to run through him. Yeah, it's really tough because as someone it's so tough because I have more Herbert than I do Burrow, so I'm like really I'm really benefiting from Herbert's success right now, and it's fun to watch. But you just think about the touchdown rates, the stuff that's unsustainable. Maybe I'm overthinking it here, but Herbert he's been so much better than I ever thought that he would have been when I was, getting him. Because what did you get him in the third round of a rookie draft? I think that's where you.
Third. I traded down with some guy who let me get him a little bit later.
Yeah, so
it ended up working out pretty good. Yeah,
I mean, he's great, but I would have to go Burrow.
I'm with you. You know, it's funny. We do think so much alike. We literally think so much alike. It's not that I mean, if Herbert keeps this pace up, he's going to be. I mean, he's at the pace of like the greatest quarterback in history right now to start.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
nobody else who's done what he's come out and done. But it's just really hard to believe that it's going to continue on at that level. But at the same time, like if he continues at that level, then it is. I think you got to give it to Herbert. His physical, because his running ability and just the cannon arm, and it's not just that he throws it down the field. He throws it down the field. It hits the spot. It hits the target. Drew Lock throws it down the field, and like you just never know where that thing's gonna end up. The receiver has to do all the work. Now with Herbert, it just seems like these are guys
In the bucket.
Jalen Guyton's out there running, just catching balls, just hitting him right. So yeah,
Everyone but Hunter Henry.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But so Burrow, yeah, I think that just because of the same juice thing, I think that we already see the leadership. He's Tom Brady to me. He's just like Tom Brady with a little better athleticism. He's a little better personality. He's a little more laid back and stuff. And you're right, he's got the offense. I think like right now, I would still take Burrow. It's really a toss up. I think that really Herbert could be a top 5 quarterback easily. All he has to do is just keep doing what he's been doing. So. Yeah, it's a tough call. I think it's one of those things. If I had Herbert and somebody wanted to trade me Burrow, I'd probably ask for a little bit. If I had Burrow and somebody asked for, I'd probably ask for a little bit. Either way, it's like just trying to give something in case I was wrong. Make up for it because really I wouldn't want to trade either. They're both just great players, and it's good to have them.
There's one thing to consider with Herbert though, is there most likely will be new coaching staff coming in. And so
yeah, that's true. But he doesn't seem like it's not like it doesn't seem like that they've really helped him. In fact, it's almost like he's helped them. Like
that's the thing, right? Is imagine if you get an Eric Bieniemy in here, or you get one of these somebody like a Sean McVay or one of these big thinkers. We haven't even seen them use his legs.
Very offensive minded, and it's systems and talent around you and so much. So I think it's hard to always just put one against one. It's not like we're comparing apples to apples with quarterbacks, especially with the talent around them. Offensive line, oh my gosh, you see Burrow back there, he's just getting killed. So many quarterbacks we underestimate. If they don't get time, they're not gonna be able to produce, and it doesn't matter how good they are. And so yeah, that's interesting. There's one more that I found myself in the offseason. I was kind of touting that the Russell Wilson, everyone was taking Kyler over Russell Wilson, and I was saying you can't take Russell. You can't take Kyler over Russell because Russell's Russell, and everyone's saying Tyler could be like Russell. And as well as Russell Wilson has played, to redeem me saying that, I honestly feel like I was still wrong because Kyler is just a maniac. That guy, his running ability, his change of direction, especially if like the leagues we play in, not so much because we get a lot of quarterback bonuses, pass completion bonuses. You have to change your mindset per league for scoring. A lot of leagues I play in, the Joe Burrow type, the passing quarterback is going to be more appealing than the running type just because of the bonuses. But in terms of a lot of the standard leagues, Kyler Murray is just. I have him in my redraft league. It's my biggest money redraft league, and he just single-handedly wins me games the last couple of weeks. Is just carrying my team. It doesn't matter. All my other players are great, but I'm outscoring teams by just tons because of Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I mean, he leads the league by far in fantasy points per drop back. He's at almost 0.9, while Russell Wilson's right behind him at 0.7. So well ahead of the pack there. I mean, Kyler Murray's just, like you said, I mean, in our leagues where it's the quarterback premium, where you're getting points for completion, and the yardage counts as the passing yards are the same as the rushing yards, so you're not getting that advantage there. Kyler Murray, I mean, his total offensive days are still going to be good for you, like the day that he had last week, but they're not going to. Those games where he doesn't bring the passing production aren't going to be as huge in our leagues. But if you're playing in a standard quarterback scoring league, Kyler Murray's he's the best thing going for you right now. He's what Lamar was for you last year. But I think that you look at Cliff Kingsbury. The one thing I've always said, the reason I've always been willing to bet on Kyler Murray is because if you look at Cliff Kingsbury and his willingness to bet on Kyler Murray, before he even had a job, he said that he would, if he had the number one pick in the draft, he'd take Kyler Murray, and then he ends up with the team who has the number one pick in the draft that drafted Josh Rosen, 7th overall the year before, or 10th overall the year before, and says, yeah, I'm going to take Kyler Murray. So, his success is tied to Kyler Murray's success. So He's going to do everything in his power to make sure Kyler Murray is successful. And so for that reason, I'm willing to bet on Kyler Murray.
Yeah, Kyler has totally lived up to it too. I mean, you know what? Like honestly, when it happened, it seemed really strange. But in like hindsight, it's 2020. It was like no wonder they were like Josh Rosen, this is not our guy, and the coach knows what they have in Kyler. His arm talent, his some of the throws he makes, it's just he is a special. I love to say this thing where I like to like try to figure out like how many like what players. There's certain players that like would only need a couple teammates to play football, you know. And Kyler, I think he might be the one player that almost needs no. He could of all the players in NFL, he could literally be the one guy who could almost play an offense by himself, like throw the ball up, run down and catch it. Like he can, it's blocking and tackling, and you can't tackle him, and he just runs around and he throw the ball. It's like he is a one man football team. It's like yeah, so Kyler is special, and it seems like with Lamar Jackson, it just feels it's different. The way they run is very different. Like they're both dynamic, but Kyler has it's this change of direction. He is like a running back. The guy on the broadcast said he's like Dante Hall, plays quarterback, and there's something to that. It's like
yeah.
0 to 100, just like he can just be standing there and then just like left, right, up. You know, it's just, what the. So yeah, it's very, very impressive. I gotta say, I was wrong that to say take Russell Wilson over Kyler, even though I think Russell Wilson's practically MVP. In our leagues, it's still not wrong, but in the case of like general, podcast advice, it probably was the wrong advice. I gotta admit, it's funny.
Yeah, I mean, again, it always depends on your league and your scoring format. And maybe your brain is just calibrated a little bit differently to some of these leagues that we play in.
Yes, it's a problem, especially for podcasting, where I find myself like up talking about quarterbacks a little bit better, not thinking because, like I said, I play so many of these leagues. These are the types that I like quarterback premium, pretty much as much, if not better, than even Superflex.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I like it really values up the quarterback, but it's not making it so that you're having to just fight over quarterbacks all the time, and then if like you end up with no quarterbacks or you end up with a lot of quarterbacks, just I kind of like that. Just the quarterback is a very important position, the most important position in sports, and it makes it that way. So
yeah,
you gotta have a good one. You gotta have a good one.
Definitely.
But,
I mean,
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it just adds intrigue to the draft, the rookie draft as well. I mean, it adds more value to the quarterbacks. I mean, you've seen Joe Burrow in some of our leagues go as a top 5 pick, top 7 pick sometimes. So just
Absolutely
adds
and
to that.
Well
as
worth
well.
it. Well worth it at this point. So talk to me about Fab budget, because I've been having like just the crazy season. I have like a kid with a hole in his pocket all season, just like, but it's actually worked out really well. I think that's my new way of playing. I just see so many people hold on to their money, and by the end of the year, they've never bought anything. I'm just like spinning. I just bid on everything. I'll bid $10 or $3, and it doesn't matter. Even if I don't want the guy, I just because there's some chance that somebody else the people forget about him, and I'll end up with him for $3. Even if I know that but I'm just bidding big money, little money, all kinds of money. What's your approach? How do you feel about Fab budget?
Yeah, so in redraft leagues, I'm obviously the same way. I mean, you can't take it with you. So what are you saving it for? I'm usually trying to burn it, as early as I can on those top guys. But in Dynasty, for me, a lot of times I feel like those top guys that are worth burning it for they're very rarely available. And so I find myself in Dynasty leagues not spending a lot on my fab because I listened to your podcast last week, actually, your most recent episode, and you had said something.
Yeah, it's still like 4 or 5 weeks ago, but yeah.
Resonated with me though, something that I used to do and for whatever reason don't do in Dynasty as much anymore. Maybe it's because I've picked up more teams, but having that rotating roster spot is so key. When you have a stagnant roster, you miss out on the James Robinsons of the world. I forgot who else you had mentioned, but you miss out on these guys.
Jake Luton this week. I mean, I went and picked up Jake Luton everywhere, and I'm just so. But I talked about Jake Luton on my podcast, dude. Jake was like I talked about him and stuff. It's like some kind of special. Had the Force or something, and now I feel like I now have renamed him Luton the Skywalker. That's my name. That's my boy. I like watched his YouTube channel and everything. His little brother was up in the stands. That's funny. But yeah, it's funny. I get attached to players, and that was one of them where this week I was bidding on Jake Luton everywhere because it's just like you got to get there first. But anyway, sorry, what you were saying.
No, it's just that I just feel like a lot of times I'm missing out on these guys because I'm like, oh well, my roster's fine. Like I don't need running back help. I don't need receiver help. Like my receiver position, like I can't do anything with it. I feel like in our league, I'm almost stuck there. Like, so I'm not really looking to add other receivers because I'm like I can't even do anything with the ones that I have. So
until you miss out on Travis Fulgham and you miss out on
thank you.
this is what I got Fulgham in a few leagues, but I also like saw him there and just like you said, I would just kind of let him go and didn't really pick him up. And now I'm being greedy. I'm just like find myself being extra greedy at times, just going, I want that guy and that guy and that guy, and I'll figure it out. Like because if they hit like the Fulgham or the kid for the Jacoby Myers, but the Patriots also getting 16 targets. It's like, get out of here, like, and I added him in a couple of leagues, but there's leagues he's just sitting out there, and I'm going, oh, you know what? Like, you got to get greedy. You got to just kind of like keep just adding and adding and adding and adding. And I found that like this year, maybe more than ever for me, because a lot of times I found myself like burned out when I get to the regular season. But this year, for whatever reason, I've been more, maybe just because we're kind of all quarantined and forced to be in a little bit more. And I've been watching a lot. Usually like week 8 or something, my wife and the kids and the family, we all go out. It's like I owe it to my wife to, after a couple of weeks, 6 weeks of watching football every week, that like we go do stuff, and I lose that like real in touch. But now this year I'm so aggressive, and I feel like it's really paid off, just because there is something about that turning of the roster that, and you can say it's a COVID year, but honestly, this year has been wrecked by injuries, and every year I think for the last 5 years, I've caught myself saying, like, this is such a crazy year. Can you believe all this is going on? The injuries, No. It happens every year. There's new players that come along every year. There's injuries that happen. There's disappointments every year. There's just every year there's always like this, like, oh, we didn't see that coming kind of feeling. And it's just because there are so many things. Like this year, it just happens to be all the best players got injured. I mean, if you didn't get hit by the injury bugs, then you didn't have good teams, because I just have like, there's just injuries everywhere. And yet, that's why having depth, I think that this COVID thing was another reason to just have a lot of depth, because injuries plus COVID, and we got those extra IR spots this year, which I think definitely helps it. But in a lot of cases, you don't get an IR, and you're just sitting there holding on to guys like a Jalen Hurd. We traded Jalen Hurd and stuff, and it's just like, I'm frustrated. I have some leagues where I don't have IR, and Jalen Hurd's just sitting there. And do I cut him for somebody? There's a Fulgham, there was a this, and I just let him sit there and keep my guy. Oh, he's gonna be good. So that's Dynasty. That is the frustrating with Dynasty. You got to like balance between the redraft and the Dynasty. That's, as a guy who's been doing DFS all season and redraft, do you have any feel for any players that you feel like are maybe Fugazis, a little fake in terms of Dynasty, that like maybe this year thing, but maybe won't carry over, or any guys that you feel like just are great for now, but you don't know, like there's, I'm sure that's every week, because when you look at those numbers, when you look at those purchases, I used to do that just to go into my DraftKings or whatever and just look at the purchase, just to kind of get a gauge of like who they think is going to be playing well this. But I found it kind of misleading at times, but there's got to be something to that practice, that activity of getting better at setting lineups.
No, that's actually a really good question. I've actually never thought about it that way. I've always looked at it as, oh, who are the buy lows, right? Who are the guys that aren't being priced up to where they should be? But who are the guys that are priced up way too high? I don't know. I mean, I guess
I just threw that question on you. So.
No, it's definitely a good question. But I guess from that, the next thought I would go to would be, well, what about players that we should be selling high on right now? Not necessarily guys that are fake, but maybe guys that we might want to get out from under. And maybe this is a little crazy, but do we want to look at maybe selling high on a Tyler Lockett, right?
You're just talking about the wide receivers and the 27-year-olds, and I was actually thinking of him as like he might, because you've got DeAndre Hopkins, you've got Michael Thomas, and you got Devontae Adams. Those are the three that I feel like are not only are they probably the three of the best receivers, but they're also those guys who are kind of at that age, 27, starting to move to the the older end of the elite receivers. But then the only other guys are like a Tyler Lockett. It doesn't feel like there's that many names, and like a Devontae Parker, or I like Stefon Diggs still. I think he's elite, but he gets injured a lot, and boy, he's getting a lot of targets. So I'm not sure how much I'd pay for those guys. But yeah, I agree. I think Lockett, especially after he has a couple of these games, DK is kind of stealing his thunder a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean he's up there. He's up there a little bit in age. Russ is up there as well, right? And you could capitalize on this monumental season that Russ is having.
You think he's up there? I think Russ could do this for 5 more years. I think they're finally giving Russ a chance to throw. His accuracy, he's never really got to show off what he can do. And yeah, he makes some mistakes, and their offensive line is pretty putrid. Like that's the problem. Their defense is terrible. That's why we're getting Dak type numbers, the Dak Cowboy numbers there.
You know what? You're right, because I always do that with Russ, and I forget that he's 31 years old, and
Oh yeah, he's not going anywhere. He's not the type
nah,
of player who wants to go anywhere.
no,
Yeah,
that dude loves football way too much. So, but still,
I
Russell.
said
I
that about
mean,
Andrew Luck though. By the way, let's just say I thought Andrew Luck loved football more than anybody, and yeah, so you never know.
oh,
Oh, that would
oh
hurt.
man,
Man. That would hurt.
yeah, that one hurts. But yeah, I mean, in terms of guys I want to buy low on though, from a dynasty perspective, I mean, rookie running backs, they're like the sunken cost in a rookie first round running back is a real thing. I mean, David Montgomery was a guy. Granted, he's been an RB2 all year, but he was a guy that after being the third or second overall pick in rookie drafts last year, you could have gotten him for a third round rookie this year potentially. Jonathan Taylor, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I'd be talking to those managers, seeing where their heads are at, taking the temperature, and seeing if I can buy low on one of these running backs, because I think the long-term value, the long-term outlook for both these guys is still very high, despite what's happening with each of their situations today.
Right, like we said, sometimes it's just if you offer them a productive wide receiver and they're a team that needs some production, you might just be able to. It's strange, like Robbie Anderson's. Maybe that's one of the kind of guys that I wonder if I'm trying to get rid of my Robbie Anderson because it's not that I don't think he's good. It's just that it's my team that I have him on. I have a couple teams I have. He doesn't fit. It's like all these beautiful young pieces, and then I've got this Robbie Anderson, and it's like I would actually just try to move him for a running back or something else that his value. I feel like. But you talk about DJ Moore, and it's kind of disappointing. You wonder, this is where year to year and quarterback, I just feel like I try to invest in really good players. And with the wide receivers especially, you're going to have – there's almost, a handful, if not maybe two handfuls of players that are going to be productive every week. And then after that, you're kind of, hit or miss, and there's going to be big games for guys. You just you need talent. You need guys who are good. But it's frustrating when you invest all this in like an A.J. Brown, and he does great, but then a Jacoby Myers goes out and matches him with 11 catches for 12, 13, 15 catches for 150 yards or whatever that was.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's like – but, yeah, so what do you – one more of these this or that. How about because I know you love A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, the two Mississippi guys, Mississippi State.
Oh man, this has been something that's been, I guess, going around a lot lately. I really love DK Metcalf. I mean, I really love AJ Brown, but I think I have to go DK Metcalf. I mean, just when you look at how young he is, obviously compared to Tyler Lockett, he's already overtaking him as the number one receiver. We saw last year as a rookie him at one point match Tyler Lockett in target share on that team. And so now, like I just said, if Tyler Lockett is near the end in Seattle, I mean, DK Metcalf would be overtaking, a number one role entirely to himself at some point in the near future. In terms of A.J. Brown, the reason I say DK Metcalf is just because Tannehill's been great, and I believe in Tannehill. I believe that he's a great player. It's just what A.J. Brown does is like the yards after the catch. That's so unsustainable in terms of the production that he's getting off of that. Not saying it's unsustainable. It's just that the way in which he does it. I think last year he was averaging 20 yards a catch, but 12 of them were coming after the catch, something insane like that. He's doing it again this year, averaging another 8 yards after the catch.
Tyree couldn't average it either. There's certain players that can break them both, but I think you have the right answer. I think DK is the right answer. I honestly don't. It's one of those situations with Burrow where I love AJ Brown so much that I'd probably trade straight up, but I don't think I would give any extra for DK just because I feel like but for me, I think the right answer is DK because of the situation, because you have Russell Wilson and you have that situation where he is the number one, and AJ Brown, it's like, he's making do with four catches and turning into 100 yards and a touchdown. But, the days that Corey Davis shows up or Johnny Smith, it's like the target share is just not there for everybody to eat every day. So I feel like if AJ Brown had the targets, I don't know. I mean, he looks strange. Sometimes he just looks so large. I mean, he looks bigger than some tight ends running down the field, but he's fast. They can't tackle him. He's agile. He can run routes. It's basically like he's everything, all like wide receiver, except for his build is like a gigantic running back tight end dude. It's just like, no.
Yeah.
I'm built differently, and he's an outlier, and I think that's why he's special to me. But DK is an outlier as well. There's very few guys with his just the range. He can catch balls, and he's so fast and explosive, so he can make big plays. I still worry about his overall musculature, and just in terms of a lot of those guys, they get injured more often. But you haven't seen it hardly at all. I think that's it. It's that was kind of the mindset, and I think there's a good reasoning behind that in a way. Just you rarely see guys that are that like with no body fat and that muscular, just like. I don't know if that's naturally good for running. It's maybe for track running, but for changing direction and doing all the, he's doing some pretty legit routes and stuff. He might get injured, and if I wouldn't be shocked if he did. But AJ Brown, everybody get injured. They all get injured. So, but I think you're right.
I mean, to that muscular thing, AJ Brown, he maybe doesn't look as muscular next to DK Metcalf, but
yeah.
he's rocked up too, man.
Totally rocked up. He's stiff. That's why I say when you watch him run, he is a little stiff, but it makes it work. He's still agile enough in the hips, and he's
so sudden
explosive. Too. Yeah, he's super explosive. Yeah, those are great players. I was watching this when we were talking. I looked on the DLF Trade Finder. It's a cool little thing on the DLF site. It's like you can just look for they'll show you recent trades that are made on my fantasy league or by certain settings. And I was surprised because, I was looking at DK and I was thinking, well, he's probably so expensive. And there was like T. Higgins and Justin Jefferson in the first round pick, but there were some that was very reasonable. And I was like, really? Maybe I should make some offers out for DK because it's like a future first player or something. It's like DK, it's just, there's not many special talents like that. And staying healthy, having a guy like that, yeah, that's why I'm saying I feel like when I look around the league right now, yeah, there's a lot of there's never teams that are complete, like all the way complete, but there's a complete set of very young, very studly wide receivers across the league and running backs when you consider this year's rookie draft and stuff that are worth investing into, especially when we talk about the COVID unknowns and everything, that it almost I'm leaning more towards as we get closer to our trade deadline, and I'm more confident that I'm going to playoffs. I'm going to make some moves, try to get rid of some of my picks and pick up some of these players, man. Just get them out there in the field now, and we'll worry about next year. Maybe I'll get another James Robinson or two. There's just so many of them. Jordan Wilkins. I've been a big Jordan Wilkins guy for a long time, and I didn't ever understand why you get a chance. And I know Jonathan Taylor is the quote better prospect, but he doesn't look better right now. Jordan Wilkins sees the hole better. He's willing to attack the hole more, and he doesn't fumble. So, Jonathan Taylor, I think that they're starting to, just say, you know what, we still want to win now. And they're starting to stick the player that, I think Jonathan Taylor was getting a leash. They were trying to, this is their young draft pick and everything. But if it was just based on performance, I think we'd see Wilkins out there already. We would have seen. That's just my opinion. And I know, like I said, I have him all over the place, so it's a bias. And I've been a tout for Wilkins for years now. It feels like every year I'm like, oh, Jordan Wilkins, add him to your roster. And it's like this year, maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
I was on Wilkins once a time ago, but I let him go after Marlon Mack's emergence. But yeah, man, I mean, Jonathan Taylor's not playing as well right now. Jordan Wilkins definitely is playing better. You'd have to imagine that the coaches see that. Like you said, this team they're 5-3. They play the Tennessee Titans on Thursday Night Football, who are also 5-3 or 6-2, I think. But either way, these teams are playing for a division title potentially on Thursday and hereafter. So maybe Jordan Wilkins is the guy that gets the run. But I wouldn't be surprised to see that late season push by Jonathan Taylor, man. We see it all the time with these rookie running backs. That's why I always tell my listeners, hey, even if you're not in it, pay attention because you don't know. David Johnson had a breakout stretch at the end, between weeks 13 and 17 that no one really, if you weren't paying attention, you didn't really know about. And Jonathan Taylor could do a similar thing here. So I'm not going to completely shut the door on Taylor, but I will add Wilkins. I mean, the same schedule that Jonathan Taylor has that I've been touting to my listeners is the same schedule that Jordan Wilkins has. And so if he can help you, even if it's not in the future, but if he can help you this year, win you maybe a playoff game or get you into the playoffs, then, hey, I'm all for it.
And honestly, I don't know that he'll help us this year because I do think even if he does get a majority of the workload. He's not going to get it all. And then you have Hines taking the pass catching. But I actually, when it's like when we go back and we talk about the next year and the unknowns, there might be guys like Wilkins, like a Mike Davis. They end up with teams going, you know what, this guy's showing that he can play in the NFL, and we just need a player, and we're going to go with that as opposed to spending draft capital on unknowns. But like I said, there's so much talent with the running backs coming out, and I wonder. I just I don't know. It's every year. It feels like I get excited about certain players, and then they turn out to be, like I said, a Fugazi, a fake. And then there's other players that it's like, okay, I think they're probably not. And then of course, you have your rights as well. It's just I'm always trying to own that sense, because it's like the James Robinson. I had him in a number of leagues. I think I have him in the league we're in, and I feel like there was three other leagues that when he got named the starter, I think he was actually named the starter, he was still available. And I made a fab budget bid for him, but it was early in the season. It was like, it was before the season even started. So I really was kind of hesitant how much I was going to bid in retrospect. But that time, as I was doing it, I said to myself, I think I need to make a bigger bid. And one of the bids, I was tied with somebody, and they got the pick, I guess, because they put it in earlier or something. So it just was one of those things. It was like a lesson where I feel like I should own 3 more James Robinson shares. I think I have 5, and I should own 8. And it's all because I didn't trust my gut. My gut was saying more, because it's experienced this enough with the fab and the things that you just suddenly know certain players. Like, okay, with the Luton, I felt like this was the time I had to buy Luton now, or it wasn't going to happen because I could get him cheap. Otherwise, and that's not that I think Luton's going to be great. I honestly think Jacksonville and the Jets, unfortunately, because of Darnold and Luton, are going to be both competing for the 1 and 2, and probably both be replaced. But that's, if anything, that's what I'm cheering against. It's just to see Darnold and get another home. We were talking about Darnold. You like Darnold too, huh?
Yeah, I mean,
you're a Jets fan. That's right.
I am a Jets fan. I do like Sam Darnold. I thought he was the best quarterback coming out of that class. Him and Baker Mayfield. I was high on Lamar as well, but I still think he's talented, man. I mean, watching up close and personal, this team has literally not helped him. They've ruined him, I would say. I mean, they didn't bring any offensive line help. They didn't get any receivers. Adam Gase is terrible for football. And so when you consider, his development, he was a raw kid coming out. He was somebody that needed work.
Super young.
And
yeah.
He was young. I mean, he's still young, 23 years old, I think, in year 3.
Wow.
So, I mean, if he goes to a place like Pittsburgh, goes to a place like Indianapolis,
It's a good spot, Pittsburgh. I like that idea.
Yeah, sit behind a Big Ben. A good organization. You're gonna walk into that offense that's gonna have weapons. You'll get to sit down, learn how to play the quarterback position again, because that's the biggest problem. His fundamentals are all over the place. He's got none right now because we don't. The Jets don't.
Plays.
He has, but the Jets don't have a quarterback coach. They don't have a quarterback coach. They don't have somebody that Adam Gase doesn't design an offense that accentuates this kid's skills. I mean, this is a kid that can move. He can move. He can throw on the run. Maybe not to the level.
His best work is on the run. Seems like.
Yeah, I mean, his best work is when the play breaks down, but he's never really learned how to play within structure. So until that happens, I think we still have yet to see the best of him, and I genuinely believe that. Jets fandom aside.
Yeah, it's hard to be a fan of a team like the Jets right now. It's just like, I grew up as a Broncos fan, and we had a lot of bad years, but I was always thankful for having LA, because it was just like for a couple seasons we had, just carry us to the championship, and then we could hang our hat on that. But the Jets, it's the last couple of years. I found myself just much more of a fan of my dynasty teams anymore now. But like, I don't feel pain when the Broncos are terrible and when Drew Lock throws terrible. It's in a way like I'm almost finding humorous, because I'm like cheering. I was all about the tank for Trevor, and I like little snippets of Lock's play, but I think it's going to be. I regret us having a mediocre season, because we're going to miss out again on a quality quarterback, and we're going to be mediocre for so long.
Yeah, I mean, ever since getting into doing podcasting and really looking into the numbers and data and stuff, and seeing, why teams are so bad, I'm actually not surprised anymore when the Jets come out and don't blow a load on football or on Sundays. So like I'm genuinely not surprised by it. So hopefully things get better. They could get a better coaching staff in here, some better players, and things will turn around. But Sundays I'm sad, but Monday through Saturday it's just studying all these other players in the league and watching all my fantasy goodness come to fruition. Hopefully on Sunday.
Yeah, so you think it was interesting they had this thing with the like adding an extra teams and stuff in case there's a shortened season. It sounds like they're hedging towards a season thing. I don't know. I feel like that could really be funky for fantasy football, because what if it happens in like week 13 and are we going to play like, how do you playoffs, the fantasy football playoffs, if they don't even have football, it's going on to they're moving on to their playoffs. It just seems like it's a topic that I haven't heard mentioned, but I was thinking the other day, like, that's really strange, because if it's a shortened season, that means you're shortening our championship game or our semi-championship. Like however many weeks you shorten it is it really has a chance of affecting our major. And after playing this whole season as hard as I have, I feel like, I don't know, it's just like this has been a good season for me in the sense that I really feel like I've been tuned in, and it's helped, and it helps to be really aggressive, and helps to be like have depth. Something I've always been attuned to is depth, and yet at the same time it is such just a crapshoot anyway. And this season is like a super crapshoot, so it's just weird to me. I don't know what we're gonna face, but I guess it's just fantasy football fun.
Yeah, man, it's definitely gonna be something interesting, but yeah, man, I don't. It's we just gotta roll with the punches, man. It's what I said in the beginning of the offseason. Somebody's gonna get COVID. We're gonna have to. Players are gonna get injured. We're just not gonna. We just can't tilt. We gotta roll. We gotta react. Same way these players do. They adjust on the field. We gotta adjust off of it. But in terms of what you were saying about the week, the championship. In redraft leagues, it's pretty easy. I mean, some of them, I know the ones I commission, we've already established, like, hey, if we don't make it past week 8, we're just throwing the whole season out. If we make it, if we make it to week 12, then 75% of the pot stays in, or 50% of the pot stays in, and then if we make it to playoffs, then the whole pot is in, something like that. So we've already established it, but in Dynasty, I don't know what you do. Like, what do you do with the draft picks, with the draft order? How do you assess any of that? In a lot of the Dynasty leagues that I'm in, I know the one that we're in, that hadn't even been discussed yet. So
I know. I think if right now you've been setting yourself up because your just team's not been good and you've sold off for all these draft picks or whatever, and then come to find out that the team that was supposed to be bad, they just gave everybody an equal shot, and it just kind of got, and they ended up being a late pick. There's a lot of ways that this could end up being funky and unfair to people, but that's, like I said, it's one more reason for me to just invest in the now. I'm always all about being present anyway, stay in the moment. And this is like if any time in our lifetimes to just stay day to day, moment to moment, this is it. And so it's play week by week, and just almost like Dynasty DFS redraft combo. It's just you have to hang on to the damn DFS team. You only get 3 options on your DFS team, but hey,
what if you do a lottery system?
Numbers. I mean, I haven't heard a whole lot of solutions that are good. I think in terms of like our leagues, I think it's just basically if it ends before the season's over, it's just the top ranked team gets a certain portion of the money, and then all the way to the 6th place, and there is no playoffs. It's basically, it's like a split up. 50% goes to the first place, and it just breaks it down so that everybody gets a chunk of the money, not as heavily paid out to the first place as if we played out the season. But if you fought all season and got the best record, you'll get the first place money. But it won't, it'll be portioned out to the 6 players instead of the 3. I'm okay with that. Whatever, it doesn't. But at the same time, it just feels like you've got to have some kind of answer. Because there's definite possibility when the league is making decisions, and I think they're hiding a lot of things that are going on right now with the COVID. It seems very funky. You're hearing about like they changed the rules so that they won't even get the answer to the test till the day after they test, even though they're testing the morning of the game. And so it's like, well, yeah, how are you going to have? Obviously, you're not going to have any negatives. We can all play. We'll find out tomorrow if we can't play. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. But it seems like they're letting things slide because they know that it's just like they're just trying to make it to the finish line now. Things are falling apart. It's all falling off, and they're just trying to get there.
Well, yeah, they didn't have a plan. They didn't really have a plan.
No,
They just, from the draft, they said, this is what we're going to do. It's going to work. It's going to be fine. And then as we saw, it wasn't fine. It didn't work, and everything wasn't okay. So
a lot better than I thought. Not even when I watch the games, it's so bizarre watching when there's no fans, but it still feels like I feel like the players have done a great job of making the football feel real. Considering all the things, like you said, considering there's guys like Matt Stafford who came off COVID and didn't practice all week, and then there's guys that are being quarantined and then have to show up and test, and then it's like all that we don't even think about all the things they're going to in the off the field just to get into the facility on a daily basis, and then go back with their family and everything. And I feel like in a way, it's I know the league has lost a little bit of money, but I do feel a little thankful in the sense that they try to put through, because I was so skeptical. I thought there's no way they're getting this season. This is going to be a complete debacle. I honestly thought it's because nobody would want to get sick, and if somebody had the potential to get sick, they just wouldn't want to play, like the lawsuits and that kind of thing. But it seems like because it spreads so rampantly, there's no such thing as like accountability anymore for spreading the disease.
yeah, the one thing I'm surprised that we haven't had yet is a team spread it to another team, right? Like, I mean, I thought that would be
they're all banging on each other, breathing on each other.
Yeah, I thought that would have been a bigger concern. It hasn't happened yet. Knock on wood. But I mean, even just today, you had today or yesterday, Vance McDonald for the Pittsburgh Steelers test positive, and then Ben Roethlisberger was sitting next to him on the plane, so he has to go on the COVID reserve list.
That's why. Okay, I heard that he was on. It was like. Yeah, he was whatever exposed or whatever. That makes sense.
Yeah,
okay.
So
and then there was other players I didn't hear who.
So now it's like our Dallas players, even though they're on bye, are they at risk? And I remember the situation happened with Minnesota and Tennessee earlier in the year, and I was thinking the same thing. So surprised that hasn't happened. Hopefully it doesn't happen.
But earlier in this, I felt like we're being more aggressive to make sure people didn't get exposed. Now it's like just like the rest of us, I guess. It's like COVID, it's like you lighten your yard a little bit. You kind of just get tired of all the and it feels like that. I don't know, it just maybe that's my interpretation, but I do feel like they're willing to let more slide by, which in a way benefits because we're getting to see more football and they're not just stopping all the games and spreading them out. But it is a little risky on their end. But I think at this point, everybody knows what they're signing up for. Football players, when you sign up to bang your head against other players and run at full speed, I don't think COVID is that scary to all these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see what happens with the bottom of the roster on those teams. Like the 0-9 Jets or the, those those teams that end up 2-14. Those practice squad players. What are they doing on weeknights and stuff during the late in the season? Are they staying home, staying quarantined and all that stuff? Are they hitting those bars late night because they know the season doesn't really matter? They're not going to the playoffs. Like, what does it matter for them?
Yeah, and all the coaches. That's what's amazing too. Like the NBA had a little bubble, and it was like so few people. And then the NFL was like, yeah, we got all of our coaching staff and massage therapists. It's like everybody, bring them all in. But they did. What I found amazing was that they did at least have the facilities surrounded and kind of like made each facility into a COVID testing place. I think a lot can be learned from that from a lot of businesses. But now we got the vaccine news and everything. Hopefully we don't, maybe it was all. It's just we can move forward soon. I'm excited. I'm excited for next year. I'm excited for football that looks a little differently than this. But I'm also just thankful that we've had something to talk about. This has been a good year. It's been football. It's been a lot of injuries. I don't think it's been that much COVID related, honestly. Like we could give it an asterisk because of all the different things, but can you really say that COVID has affected the fairness of play necessarily as much as the injuries?
No, I mean, I think the biggest situation you'd probably say is maybe what happened recently with the San Francisco 49ers and the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah.
They had a bunch of guys with false positives that had gone on the COVID reserve list.
I had Ayuk stuck in a lineup too. I was pissed. I didn't realize that I left him in. I was like, oh, Ayuk is in there. Zero.
I spent like maybe 30 minutes taking Ayuk out of my lineups because that's how much Ayuk I have. If you haven't noticed,
I know you.
But
you can hardly got. That was a good trade for you. I remember that you and I traded. I gave you my first round pick for him. Or you gave me. Yeah.
Melvin Gordon for
yeah, Melvin Gordon. I needed running backs. I hadn't got Alvin Kamara and nothing. But now, if you look at my team, that's what's amazing. I have James Robinson, Alvin Kamara. It's amazing how it works with running backs. You feel like, oh, I'm just so desperate, and then you put attention on that position, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm overloaded at that position. Now I need to give attention to another position. Sometimes actually saying I need to focus on this position, and suddenly just guys who are just backups and turn in starters, and you have depth. And yeah, I feel fine on my running backs. But at that time, I was desperate. I was like, Melvin Gordon, yes, I'll take. And I was hedging my bet against. I have Philip Lindsay in literally every league. I have Melvin Gordon in a couple. So for me, it felt really good to hedge against Philip Lindsay a little bit, because it's like if Melvin Gordon doesn't do crap, fine, that's great. That's Philip Lindsay's time. But if not, then I needed to hedge. So it worked.
Yeah, I mean,
Ayuk's the better. Get the better player.
I love some Ayuk, but no, to that point, like you just said, if I have a spot that's weak, I just plug away. I plug resources at it until I get it filled. I mean, I think a couple of years ago I was looking for a tight end, and I was planning on taking one in the first or the second round of the rookie draft. Couldn't get my hands on an Evan Ingram or a David Njoku, so I plugged away in the rookie draft or in the free agent draft, and I end up with George Kittle. So
yeah, George Kittle was the gem of like, hey, this guy's pretty good. People say he's pretty good. Let's pick this guy. Yeah, I feel like so many of my gems are guys that it's not like I had like 100% conviction on them. It's more it became that rotating spot, and you have to have conviction to pick a guy up. Like I have conviction on Philip Lindsay. I've had conviction on a lot of these players, but maybe it's not necessarily like, oh, I know they're going to be great, but there's the potential. So you want to, like the James Robinson. I just saw, okay, this guy could be the starter. You never know. And then it's like, oh yes, if I'd have known, of course I would have tried a lot harder to get this guy. But that's just part of, I think, some of my favorite dynasty players and some of my favorite dynasty moves have been pure luck. Just nothing but. Just don't stumble across a player, but you have to believe still. You have to give him a chance. You have to have the roster spot.
Yeah.
The universe rewards action. That's what I always say. It's like you didn't do it. You didn't do it. You got to do it. And that's the action is the reward. You have to do it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you said something earlier that you're just reminding me now. I have to say it because Robbie Anderson, you talked about him and how he's a player that you want to trade away. I traded away Robbie Anderson for third-round rookies this year in all my leagues. I was just trying to unload Robbie Anderson because in my mind he was going to Carolina, Teddy Bridgewater. He was a deep threat receiver. Just the fit wasn't great. And I was like, let me cash in on what I can now. And the other day in our league, Robbie Anderson, the same Robbie Anderson, I flipped for a third, got flipped for a one.
Oh.
Yeah,
it's you live and learn. I find that I find myself a lot of times with those kind of deals, just holding with a guy like Robbie Anderson, who you feel like he's getting paid $11 million. He's not really, like, in your mind in the offseason, you're thinking he's not really this valuable of an asset. But at the same time, like I find I always want to wait to see. There's a lot more of waiting to see, and I find myself that I'll miss out on opportunities because I'll sit on a guy a little too long. But it comes back around. In a lot of cases, if you believe in the player. And Robbie, I could see where you did that with Robbie, because I thought Curtis Samuel and I think everyone expected DJ Moore to be the number one.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was funny is that you saw him with the Jets. I think that there would be one thing is when I saw him with the Jets, I was convinced that the guy was more than just a deep threat. Like I watch him and I say, man, for a skinny little dude, he goes over the middle. He has wiggle. He's got some kick return type skills. And he's long, and he seems to have just like figured out how to produce in the NFL, which is a skill in itself. And so, I think that, I guess in retrospect, it seems more like, oh yeah, we should have seen that coming. But for all of us, that's where it is. It's this weird thing in the offseason. Everybody kind of has the same gauge on players. We all have the same value range. And so if he's worth a third-round pick, and he's worth what he's worth, essentially, in the offseason, if you feel like moving him, you're going to move him for that. And then you find out later, like, oh, that really wasn't the right play. It's not that you were terrible with your move. It's just that guy outplayed the offseason value.
Yeah, I think I think what goes into it though is my motivation to move Robbie Anderson. It had nothing to do with Robbie Anderson. Not that it had nothing to do. It didn't have as much to do with him and his situation going to Carolina. It had the fact to do with I was trying to really load up on this rookie wide receiver class. I was trying to get as much Justin Jefferson, as much Brandon Ayuk, as much Jalen Reagor, as much as those guys as I could. And so I viewed Robbie Anderson as an avenue to get up to those guys.
Yeah, and you traded me Alan Lazard, and I remember that because I've listened to your podcast, and I know you actually really liked Alan Lazard, and yet you were very willing to use him as a just to move up 4 spots in your linebacker or whatever. And I remember I just was like, it's you like the player, but you also, if you have a lot of a player, it seems like you're willing. I feel like I'm the opposite. Like once I get, like if I get a guy, I want him on every team. I'm like, I got him everywhere. And it's like I get greedy or something. Like if I because I've had some success with certain players who've hit, and I have them a lot of places, that I find that there's this amazing thing that can happen, that if you just get a guy who's not hit yet and get him on a lot of leagues, and he does hit, you suddenly have this wealth of boost on all your teams. But a lot of times I fail, a lot of times I miss, and I just have a bunch of one guy that doesn't hit. Antonio Callaway is like he's my guy that just I had to have Antonio Callaway, had to have him. I gave up so many different trades. I drafted him over so many players. DJ Chark. I mean, the number of shares I have in DJ Chark, the only reason I don't have DJ Chark in every league is because I took Antonio Callaway instead of him everywhere. Instead, it was like I took DJ Chark a few times as like a hedge, but it's like I was so infatuated with his talent, and I look back and I go, just why did you have to do that? Why did you have to have everywhere? Why couldn't you just spread it? So this year I did a little bit more of that, taking 3 and 3 and 3, and I still went crazy with Henry Ruggs. And yeah, I don't know. Henry Ruggs a little disappointed so far. I love the players still, but they're just not getting the ball. He's not getting targets. So another one of these we got to wait and see. Same with Rager.
Yeah, I mean, those guys I buy low on, especially Ruggs. I think he's still a great player. You'd have to imagine. I mean, I don't know. Vegas, they say so much, but they looked at Tom Brady last year. Derek Carr is obviously playing a little bit better, but I don't think he's the long-term guy for them. So at some point, maybe they got a quarterback in there that's going to be willing to really let it rip for Ruggs.
And I think he's getting. I've noticed an Aguilar keeps getting deep passes, and so Carr can throw it. But I feel like when I watch the tape or whatever, I just see that Ruggs is getting the attention, and Carr is Aguilar is benefiting from the presence of Ruggs, which is a lot of the people, a lot of the doubters on Ruggs. This was their take, was that he's this field stretcher and he's not going to be. And I took him over Jefferson a number of times, and I regret that at this point. It's like, okay, yeah, T. Higgins to me is I can adapt, I can learn. At the same time, I love Ruggs as a player, and I think if he gets in the right situation, he's absolutely a Tyreek or OBJ type threat, where he's just he can light it up on any. But he needs the targets. He needs someone to actually start getting him the ball. But right now, it doesn't seem like they're trusting him with that, or he's that Derek Carr is able to fulfill it with double team coverage, or at least the safety oftentimes leaning on his side. So he
also has been dealing with the knee injury, I think it was.
It was slow recovery from knee, and he had something early in this. And that does, you're right. Like, so we get it. It's 1 week. You could be all nicked up, and week to week, it's like you, and if you've ever played basketball and tweak your ankle or something, and then the next week you go out, you can still play, but you're going to be a little less of yourself. And then if you keep playing on it, it's not going to heal properly. It's going to be a little hard. So yeah, with rookies especially, they're not used to the long season either. I mean, Alabama, the number of plays that he had to play, he was not even on the field a lot of plays. It's like they dominated games so much. It's like, here, go play 6 plays, and he would do his 6-7 plays really well, and he's out there just blowing people up and running around him. But he didn't have to stay on the field and take the attrition of NFL games. So yeah, are
you concerned? Are you concerned at all about Ruggs's injury? His maybe being injury prone at all?
I mean, he's a guy who's slight. So that, obviously with all slight guys, even Tyreek, even though he's built a little bit more kind of short and stout, he seems to, when a guy, something about the smaller guys, I noticed this with Tariq Cohen, that when the big guys get their hands on them, they want to do more damage on the little guys. They like to grab them and slam them on the ground. Philip Lindsay as well. Some of my little guys that I love so much, I watch them and I'm just like, these big 300-pound, 200, once they get him, they want to hurt him. They want to slam that little guy on the ground. And so there is that propensity for the little guys. But, football is football. There's some guys who are just tough and built for it. There's some guys that it doesn't matter what they do, they seem to always get injured. And I have no explanation for that. Like, you could talk about DK and his musculature, and you can talk about other guys and their this and that, but maybe yoga helps, maybe this and that. So yeah, I think that he's definitely not the kind of guy you want just taking balls over the middle. He can too, but it's not the guy you want taking that ball over the middle and then just like shoving his shoulder in and diving for first downs too often. If you need to have it. Yeah,
No, it was a thought I had because I remember he got hurt running the 40 at the combine. Then he had a weird situation in the off season where he got pinned between a truck or something like
yeah,
that. I
it
don't
was
know if
just
you
it was
remember
a
that.
U-Haul. It was a U-Haul
Yeah,
trailer or something. I think that was just a
and
one-off.
then there was he had was it a shoulder? She had something in the off season in the training camp that kept him out for a week or two. Then he suffered the knee injury in that I think it was the Chiefs game. Then he came back and suffered another ankle injury. But basically, what I'm getting at is I feel like the dude's been banged up since I've got my eyes on him in the league.
It's a legitimate argument, especially when you think about the fact that, like, say, he didn't. It's not. He never had the workload. What I was betting on was not his workload. It was not his production. It was seeing him, yeah, and just seeing every play that he actually played. He was amazing. He's an amazing talent, and so I was betting on that. In terms of, I think there is something to be said about that when you look at certain players who are built a little bit more for the NFL, built a little bit more for a lot more targets. And in fantasy football, that's what it really is about. So, yeah, I say that, and except for the other day when he had 2 catches for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns or whatever. It's there's games where you're like, oh yeah, this guy just all it takes is one play, and it's like Tyreek-ish, where it's just like 1 or 2 plays, and he's already got you 160 yards and a couple touchdowns. Will Fuller comes to mind. Will Fuller had a lot of injuries early in his career. A lot of the same thing. He's a very similar player, super explosive. Everyone's kind of had him as just as a field stretcher, not necessarily an all-around player, but Will Fuller really developed into an all-around player. And I think that I don't see Ruggs' body type quite filling out as well as Fuller. I do think that there's certainly potential for him to, kind of find his groove, figure out how to avoid contact. Marvin Harrison's of the world. There's a lot of small guys that when you start to figure out angles, figure out when to get down, as the game slows down, therefore you're not just running around waiting to get clobbered. You're decisively getting to where you need to be and getting the play over with before you get hurt. And then, there's certain players I don't expect them to be overly tough. I'm not asking you to go fight for the extra yard. I'd rather you stay healthy, especially with most quarterbacks. I'm always baffled at quarterbacks and they just throw their body around. You're the team's most valuable piece. What are you doing? There's running backs for that. That's why they have the hammer. That's what you bang with the hammer, So anyway, it's
the mentality thing of those guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Anything
man,
else?
it's been great.
Any things you're curious about with the Dynasty? Anything you want to share? Shout out to Greg, by the way, Greg Penniman. What's up, man? I consider trying to get both you guys on, but honestly, like, I have a hard enough time. I don't even host very often. Usually I just do a solo show. I'm like, I don't know if I can handle 2 different people. I'm just a bad enough host, just by myself. Add another person, and we'll see how it goes. Add 2 more, and then we get really crazy. So, but yeah, when we get Greg on here,
Greg's happy, man. Yeah, we definitely have to. He'll be definitely be happy to talk about his team, man. He's making a comeback. He's I think in 7th. He's in 7th place right now. He's making a run behind Joe Burrow and T. Higgins stack.
Oh, that's a nice stack. See, I'm in 1st place. I got my 1 loss. But what's funny is that last year I was a team in the pack when I came and I won. The year before, when you beat me and all that was actually I was in 1st place. So I have this year. I don't like being in 1st place. Honestly, I'm going to run into somebody like you, and I'm supposed to win, and this is not going to happen. So yeah, the 1st place isn't making me feel all that comfortable right now. But long season.
Yeah,
we're getting there,
man. I mean, last year being my first year not being in the finals, I didn't know what it was like. Felt a little weird, but hopefully,
it's like I said, you are definitely my peak rival in that league. But there's some good teams, but it feels like we're always it's always you and I that are fighting over that championship.
I'm always checking in the playoffs. Did Sonny lose?
I just knew it. I had that feeling that time we checked it. I was like 6-7. He's going to beat me 6-7. But it was also looking at your team. When record doesn't matter as much to me a lot of times because we're not playing football. We're not playing on a field with crowds. We're not playing with even teams it's all about. So it's just like week to week. It doesn't matter. I just need to get there and I need to have a good team and I'll take my chances from there. We'll see what happens. But all right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been great to have you. We will definitely get together soon. Appreciate everything. And talk to you soon.
All right, Sonny. Thank you, man.
Right on.